Have you ever wondered who truly controls Europe's economy? Not politicians, not tech billionaires, but a family you've probably never heard of. Their wealth? $278 billion. That's not a typo. That's more than the GDP of entire nations. They control companies that touch your life, every single data phone in your pocket, the medicine in your cabinet, the technology powering your world. Yet they operate in the shadows, deliberately staying out of the spotlight. No flashy yachts plastered across tabloids. No reality TV shows. Just pure, calculated power, spanning 5 generations. Today, we're diving deep into the extraordinary story of the Wallenberg family, Europe's richest and most secretive dynasty. And trust me, this story is unlike anything you've heard before. Chapter 1, The Origins. Let's rewind to 1856. Sweden is a poor, agricultural country on the periphery of Europe. While Britain is building an empire and America is heading toward civil war, Sweden is barely industrialized. Enter Andre Oskar Wallenberg, the son of a Lutheran bishop. Now, you'd think a bishop's son might follow in his father's footsteps, right? Not this one. Ao, as he was known, had bigger ambitions. He saw something others didn't. Opportunity. In 1856, Ao founded Stockholm's Enskilda Bank or SEB. This wasn't just another bank. It was Sweden's first major investment bank, and it would become the foundation of what would eventually be a global empire. But here's what's fascinating. Ao didn't just lend money like traditional banks. He became a partner in the businesses he financed. Took risks. He invested in Sweden's emerging industries: mining, manufacturing, railways. When these companies succeeded, the Wallenberg family succeeded exponentially. When Ao died in 1886, his sons Knut and Marcus took over. And this is where the Wallenberg strategy truly crystallized. They understood something profound. Individual companies rise and fall, but if you control the entire ecosystem, you become invincible. The second generation expanded aggressively. They didn't just finance Swedish companies. They built them, guided them, sat on their boards. By the early 1900s, the Wallenberg sphere, as it became known, was already shaping Sweden's industrial landscape. Think about this. While other wealthy families were buying mansions and living lavishly, the Wallenbergs were reinvesting everything. Profit wasn't for consumption, it was for power. And that's a crucial difference that we'll see play out over the next century. Chapter 2, Building an Empire Now. Let's fast forward to the mid-20th century. World War II has devastated Europe. Economies are in ruins, but Sweden, neutral throughout the conflict, is positioned uniquely, and the Wallenbergs are about to make their most legendary moves. But first, we need to talk about Raoul Wallenberg. In 1944, while Europe burns, a young Wallenberg family member is sent to Budapest on a humanitarian mission. Raoul Wallenberg, using his diplomatic connections and sheer audacity, issues protective passports and shelters thousands of Jewish people from the Holocaust. He saves tens of thousands of lives before mysteriously disappearing into Soviet custody, where he likely died. This story is crucial because it shows something important about the Wallenberg family. They operated at the highest levels of international affairs. They had access, connections, and influence that went far beyond business. Now, back to the empire building. The post-war generation, led by Marcus Wallenberg Jr., made aggressive moves. They invested heavily in companies that would define modern Sweden. Ericsson in telecommunications, ASEA in electrical engineering, Saab in aerospace and automotive, Electrolux in appliances. But here's the genius part. In the 1970s, the Swedish government started imposing restrictions on banks holding large equity positions. Most families would have been crippled by this, not the Wallenbergs. They simply transferred all their equity holdings to a new entity, Investor AB. This holding company, founded in 1916 but now taking center stage, became their flagship vehicle. And here's the kicker: it allowed them to maintain control while actually strengthening their position. By the 1970s, the Wallenberg sphere controlled companies that employed 40% of Sweden's industrial workforce. Let that sink in. 40%. In one country. One family effectively controlled nearly half the industrial economy of an entire nation. But Sweden is a small country. The Wallenbergs thought bigger. Through the 1980s and 90s, they went global. Ericsson expanded worldwide. They backed AstraZeneca's formation, which would become one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. They invested in ABV, a robotics and automation giant. They even acquired stakes in NASDAQ, literally owning a piece of America's stock exchange. This wasn't empire building in the traditional sense. The Wallenbergs perfected what you might call strategic invisibility. They controlled without appearing to control. They influenced without drawing attention. And this strategy, this almost ninja-like approach to power, is what allowed them to survive and thrive when other dynasties fell. Chapter 3. The Secret Sauce. So how does a family maintain wealth and power across 5 generations? Because statistically, this shouldn't happen. Most family fortunes are decimated by the 3rd generation. There's even a saying, shirts lifts 2 shirts lifts in 3 generations. The Wallenbergs developed a system, and it's brilliant. First, the foundations. In 1917, they established what would become a network of 16 foundations, now collectively worth over $27 billion. These foundations serve multiple purposes. They fund research. They're Sweden's largest private source of research funding. They support universities. They invest in startups. But here's the strategic genius. The foundations hold significant shares in the family's companies, which prevents wealth dilution across generations. Instead of splitting ownership among dozens or hundreds of family members, the foundations maintain concentrated voting power while distributing benefits more broadly. Second, ruthless selection of leadership. Not every family member gets to lead. The Wallenbergs have always followed a principle of meritocracy within the family. Leadership passes to the most capable, not necessarily the oldest or the most direct descendant. Currently, Jacob Wallenberg leads the empire. But there are about 30 members of the 6th generation being trained, evaluated, prepared. Only the best will take the reins. Third, long-term thinking. The Wallenbergs don't chase quarterly earnings. They don't flip companies for quick profits. They build them, nurture them, sometimes for decades before seeing massive returns. This patient capital approach gives them an enormous advantage over short-term focused investors. Let me give you a concrete example. Investor AB, their flagship company, has delivered average annual returns of over 10% for decades. Not by trading, not by speculation, but by identifying strong companies, backing excellent management, and holding for the long term. Their portfolio today reads like a who's who of global industry. AstraZeneca in pharmaceuticals, Ericsson in telecommunications, Atlas Copco in industrial tools, AB in robotics, SEB in banking, and dozens more. The numbers are staggering. Investor AB alone has a market capitalization of around $60 billion. But the total value of the Wallenberg sphere, including all their holdings, foundations, and investments, is estimated at $278 billion. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the entire GDP of New Zealand or Finland. One family controls wealth equivalent to entire developed nations. Chapter 4. Power in the shadows. But money alone doesn't tell the full story. The Wallenbergs wield influence that extends far beyond their bank accounts. In Sweden, they're sometimes called the shadow government. And it's not entirely hyperbole. They shape economic policy through their extensive network. They influence education through their research funding. They drive innovation through their venture investments. Almost every major Swedish company has some connection to the Wallenberg sphere. Almost every leading Swedish researcher has received Wallenberg funding. Almost every major Swedish innovation in the past century has some Wallenberg fingerprint on it. But they're careful. They've cultivated a reputation as guardians of Swedish prosperity, not exploiters of it. They position their interests as aligned with Sweden's national interests. And mostly, it works. On the international stage, they operate differently. They're major players in the European business community. Marcus Wallenberg, Jacob's cousin, sits on numerous international boards. The family has connections to political leaders, business titans, and influencers worldwide. But they maintain that distinctive Wallenberg discretion. You won't see them giving flashy TED Talks. You won't see them on Forbes magazine covers. They give measured interviews to serious business publications and otherwise stay out of the limelight. Compare this to other ultra-wealthy families. The Kardashians built an empire on visibility. Elon Musk tweets constantly. The British royals are perpetual tabloid fodder. The Wallenbergs, they're allergic to attention. This invisibility is strategic. It's harder to criticize what you can't see. It's harder to regulate what operates in the shadows. It's harder to tax what's distributed across foundations, holding companies, and international structures. And there's something else. The Wallenberg method of control. They often don't hold majority ownership in their companies. Instead, they use a dual-class share structure and strategic board positions. They control with 20% ownership what others would need 51% to control. This allows them to leverage their capital exponentially. With relatively modest direct investments, they influence companies worth hundreds of billions. Chapter 5 challenges and the future, but no dynasty is invincible. The Wallenbergs face challenges that would have been unimaginable to AO in 1856. First, technology disruption. The Wallenberg Empire was built on industrial companies manufacturing, telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, but the world is shifting to digital, to software, to AI. Companies like Tesla, Amazon, and Google are creating wealth faster than traditional industry ever could. The Wallenbergs have adapted by investing in tech startups and digital transformation of their existing companies. But can a family rooted in 19th century banking truly compete in a 21st century digital economy? Time will tell. Second, political pressure. As wealth inequality becomes a global issue, extremely wealthy families face increasing scrutiny. Sweden, despite its capitalist success, has strong social democratic traditions. There's growing pressure for wealth, redistribution, higher taxes, and breaking up concentrated economic power. The Wallenbergs have so far maintained their social license by positioning themselves as responsible stewards and generous philanthropists, but in an era of populist politics, that may not be enough forever. Third, succession. The sixth generation is now being prepared. But can they maintain the discipline, the vision, the strategic brilliance that built this empire? History suggests that few families manage successful transitions beyond 5 or 6 generations. The Wallenbergs have implemented rigorous training programs. They've created governance structures designed to outlast individuals. They've built institutional knowledge into their foundations and companies. But ultimately, the future depends on people alone. Whether the next generation has the capability and commitment to carry this forward. And finally, the existential question. In a world facing climate change, social upheaval, and rapid technological change, what role should dynastic wealth play? The Wallenbergs are betting they can be part of the solution, investing in sustainable technology, funding climate research, transforming their portfolio for a new era. But critics argue that concentrated wealth itself is the problem, regardless of how it's invested. This philosophical debate will likely intensify in coming decades. So, what do we make of the Wallenberg family? Are they visionary builders who created prosperity for millions? Or are they an example of everything wrong with concentrated wealth and power? Honestly, they're probably both. They've undeniably built an extraordinary empire. They've funded research that advanced science. They've created companies that employ hundreds of thousands. They've generated wealth, not just for themselves, but for Sweden as a nation. But they've also accumulated power that no single family in a democracy arguably should have. They've influenced policy, shaped markets, and controlled resources that perhaps should be more democratically distributed. The Wallenberg story is ultimately a mirror. What you see in it depends on your values. Do you admire their discipline, their long-term thinking, their strategic brilliance? Or do you question a system that allows such concentration of wealth and influence? $278 billion. 5 generations. One family, the richest in Europe, operating in the shadows, shaping our world in ways most of us never realize. The next time you use your phone, take your medication, or benefit from modern technology, remember, there is a good chance a Swedish family you've never heard of played a role in making it possible. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And let me know in the comments, are the Wallenbergs brilliant strategists or an example of dangerous wealth concentration? Until next time, keep questioning who really holds power in our world.